Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe free of bullshit but full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS Marketing Show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Josh Freeman, founder and president of CabbyGo, a new ride-sharing app that recently launched in Pittsburgh. We'll hear all about Josh and his vision for CabbyGo. The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. That's audibletrial.com/nobs. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. I've been a big Audible user for years because Audible and podcasts enable you to multitask and drive down the road and listen to a book, get caught up, whatever. So Josh Freeman of CabbyGo, let's just start with the whole thing. What is CabbyGo?
Hi, thanks for having me. CabbyGo, we provide a marketplace online on your digital device or your smartphone that allows riders to make ride requests and drivers to bid on those rides, and then the riders can choose the best option.
So it sounds a little bit like this small company I heard about last week called Uber.
Yeah.
So tell me how it's not Uber.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. The big difference really is the bidding system. It's patent pending. It allows the drivers to choose their pricing. So if you live in an underserved area or a neighborhood that, maybe you can't get a ride in, this allows drivers to bid and the riders to choose the driver they want. And that's the biggest difference between ourselves and other rideshare companies. And that's actually the biggest thing to overcome is people aren't used to that. So when they start using our system, we always see 2 or 3 failed ride requests, and that's okay. If you get yourself comfortable with the app, and you can always cancel the ride request. There's no penalty until you choose the driver. You're not engaged with a driver, so you can always make a ride request, and if you don't like the options after the 45 seconds to choose a driver, make the ride request again. Because these drivers are all out there and they're all looking for rides.
So let me tell you what happened. Whenever we heard about you and my team started saying you got to get this guy on the show, and after meeting you in 2 minutes, I went, I see what they meant because we're gonna have a lot of fun because you're a no bullshitter.
Thank you.
So I said immediately, whoa, you guys know I love Uber. Uber's been great for me for years. I don't want to not give this guy his props and not let him have his say. So they were like, well, it's not Uber. And I said to them, and I even said to you in the pre-thing, I said, so then every time I get somebody, they come up in an actual cab? And
that is a big misconception. Our name is meant to be a little bit retro. We are using regular people. Our drivers are regular people with regular cars. And we have the special insurance policy to make sure that we've got all the coverages and protections for the riders and the drivers. But these are just people out there. These can be professionals that are doing the big commute from here all the way out to Irwin. Or it could be, and when I say professional, I mean somebody that works in Gateway Center that's trying to monetize their ride out there. Or it can be a driver that's doing this full time. And he's out there. I hate to say the word hustling, but he's doing as many rides as he can a day. And that's the big difference. The CabbyGo name is it's a retro name that allows people to get rides.
Okay. So CabbyGo is a retro name, which I like now that I get it. And I think you, from a messaging standpoint, I think you need to kind of tell that story more frequently so that people don't think it's a cab. Yeah. But what I love about Uber is no matter where I am, and I speak, throughout the country for Vistage International. I'm a part of the National Speakers Association, so I'm in a lot of different places. And I typically use Uber because I feel like, bam, I hit this button. I know what I got. I don't have to worry about tip. I don't have to worry about anything. No. They get me there, whatever. And one of the things I like, and I'm going to talk to you about as we get into this more, I'm talking about maybe we can work on this together. There's an idea I have about podcasting through this, and maybe you and I can partner on that. So that's what I like about Uber. Tell me, what is that how you are? Is like I hit the button? Like that's what I think I'm looking for. I'm looking for safe. I'm looking for quick.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there is a cost to getting the best, the most economical, the closest, or the highest rated. What you're talking about is called what I call PABGAR, push a button, get a ride. That's the classical system. Mm-hmm. You push a button, you get a ride. The drivers are assigned the pricing. They're assigned where to go. They have no choice in the matter. And when you support that system, you're kind of commoditizing the drivers and their time. And that's fine for the consumer, but the drivers are completely pissed off about it, and they're looking for a third option. And that's where we kind of shine.
So do you cost more? Because one of the things that you said earlier before we hit the mic, and I even got yelled at by both Alec and Mike Gaddy because you were saying all these nuggets, and I don't want to miss them. You were talking about how quick, convenient, and safe are ubiquitous. So why don't we get on that path?
Yeah, well, rideshare companies, we're all regulated, and I consider a ride a commodity. It's got to be safe, it's got to be clean, it's got to be convenient, and those are the three big things, and that becomes a commodity. And
so you're saying Uber, Lyft,
it's all the same.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, we actually turned down about 60% of other rideshare companies' drivers. So our requirements are a lot tighter. So you're going to get a driver with our system that is the highest level of a driver. I don't have a message there or a good, cool way to say that.
I know a marketing guy that could kind of
good.
Maybe you can hook it up with him. Okay.
All right. Yeah. So when it gets down to it, it depends where you are, really. If there's a higher supply of drivers than there are to ride requests, then those drivers are going to compete against each other in our system. And we have this patent pending open bidding system, which allows the drivers to bid on the rides, and they can see each other's bids. So they can undercut each other. Or if there's not enough drivers, they're going to charge a little bit more. So we don't have an assigned surge to bring drivers out. But if they start bidding what they're willing to take, then we're going to allow the system to fight itself.
Okay, you've hit on something now. Yeah. This is really good. This is important because I do love Uber, but I also have had many hilarious things that afterwards I laughed about, but during I thought that was ridiculous. So when you say that you don't take their 60% of their drivers, I get where you're going there because I have had some bad drivers. So give you an example. One time I'm in Dormont. I have to get back to the office and I go through the first Uber driver and there was a language barrier. He couldn't find around Dormont for whatever reason. So then he probably shouldn't have tried to get the ride. And then when we called, there was a language barrier. He was unable to understand when I said, I'm in Dormont and I need to get to Pittsburgh and I'm right next to Campedes. There was a language barrier there because I didn't say that clearly. I just said it the way I said it, which was pretty clear. But that was sarcasm, by the way. But so now tell me about how that would have happened for me, and how does it happen for me so I'm able to quickly get the best person on your instead.
Well, our drivers are completely vetted. We do in-person interviews with all of them, and I'm not going to say you're not going to have a bad experience, but we're going to do our best to make sure that all the drivers are weeded out. And it's not just with our competitors. They don't necessarily get rid of bad drivers. They just make sure that if you don't give them a 5-star, you don't get that driver again. So there is no system of completely weeding out drivers. Whereas, we're small enough right now that we're able to monitor everything and make sure everything's going well.
And my expectation is it's not going to be perfect. It's just like when I go into, say, Brugger's today, I had a good experience, but if I go in tomorrow, I might not. Yeah. And you're kind of willing to accept that with some of the things. And there's a whole customer service diatribe I could go on about how customer service has gotten worse. But tell me what the experience is for me as an Uber user for many years. Yes. I go and I download your app today, and I will. As soon as we're done with the show, I'll download the app. So the first time I try it, what's going to happen, because he will tell you, anyone that works at Mass Solutions will tell you that I'll bitch and moan when something doesn't work the first time because I'm very, it's wrong. I need to calm down and realize that every time I try something, it's going to suck the first time. And that's just new for my generation. For millennials and under, that's normal. But for other generations, that's a little harder. So we have to adapt. I'm admitting I have to adapt. But so I'm going to go on this, and I'm probably going to screw it up because I'm just going to go, what would I do on Uber?
I have seen everything. Our basically applications on smartphones are virtual bus stops. I mean, everything gets messed with all the time. And I enjoy getting feedback from riders and drivers. And I want to hear about every problem and every glitch in the system. And, you prioritize. And I come from a long, a few years of software development here, where you take the big problems first and you bang them out and you keep on working on those bugs. And we're literally every day cleaning up 3 to 5 bugs. Not to say that our system's totally buggy, but there are little things that when people hit something and cancel something there, it doesn't happen. and that's all gets weeded out. We push new versions every day or two.
So what's my experience like though? I hit yours as opposed to Uber. What does it look like? What do I do that's different than what I would do on
the
Uber?
rider side?
Yes.
You make a ride request. You're going to sit there for about 30 seconds. There's a little countdown. And then we're going to display all the riders or all the drivers to you that bid on that ride. And the first one's going to be the most economical. So you'll be able to see that driver, and then you can slide to the right or to the left like a jukebox, and you'll be able to see the other options that are available. And you can kind of see a little bit about the driver. And then once you choose that driver, then you're engaged. The driver gets information about you. You get the information about the driver. We have a text backup system just in case everything goes awry, which it hasn't in a long time, but it's still there. So you get some text messaging. You can always call or text the driver and vice versa. And we try to impress upon the fact to our drivers, if you get a ride request and that rider chooses you, you should call them and introduce yourself and let them know you're on the way. That's just, a little things to make sure everybody's in line. And one of the other big differences, which we didn't even talk about, our drivers take cash or credit. So when you set up your app on your smartphone, you're immediately displayed with setting up your account, which is your profile picture, your email address, whatever. But then it asks for your credit card. And if you cancel out of that credit card section, you then go into cash mode. Now, that means that you're a little bit more limited to what drivers will be able to bid on your ride, but they are in cash mode then. So you can just pay your driver directly at the end of the ride.
Interesting. What's your take on why someone would want
I'm glad you asked.
Cash?
I'm a big privacy advocate. And if you don't want anybody to know what you're doing, it's really no one's business. And I don't see why cash is so frowned upon nowadays. Like, that's still a thing. Mm-hmm. It's still around, and people should be able to spend it. And the reason I think maybe I'm so gung-ho on the cash mode is, I was in San Francisco last year. I couldn't get a ride unless I used my credit card. Like, that blew my mind. I couldn't even get a taxi without a credit card. Yeah, so I'm glad that's an option now. Yeah.
Josh Freeman, the president and founder of CabbyGo, which launched here in Pittsburgh recently. We're talking about his app and how he's going to have to tell that story, because a couple of quick things. So you said about 30 seconds.
Yes.
Do you explain any of that when I sign up? Because let me tell you why. Yes. If I'm used to Uber, it might be 30 seconds, but it doesn't seem like that to me, and I could be wrong. And that could be me, but I'm the customer. My perception is that I hit the Uber thing and I'm thinking it's 5 to 10 seconds that I have something.
I'm sure our competitors are just like that because they directly assign the rides. With our system, there is a countdown on the screen and something we call the bidometer. That's a little bit gimmicky, but the point is it shows the countdown at the time, and you could see these drivers bid against each other, which is the magic of the system. I want people to realize, like, this is a live system, it literally alive. And you're watching the invisible hand work itself out. And the drivers can see each other's bids. So if one driver is 25 minutes away and the other driver is a minute away, the driver that's a minute away, since you're so close, he doesn't have to deadhead anywhere. So he's not wasting his gasoline, and that translates into better economics. And he's able to bid less than someone that would have to drive further to pick you up. So you're kind of taking advantage of where they are geographically.
Okay. So I see this as there's a certain market segment that is going to value the cash piece. There's a certain market segment that's going to value the privacy piece. A certain market segment is going to value seeing the bidometer or bidometer, however you want to pronounce it. So I get that kind of stuff. Let's go back and talk about how you've approached it, because one of the things as I read about you online and looked at the press coverage recently is that you went about it differently, and let's just say you went about it legally. So let's go the whole, because there's been a big legal push in many cities against Uber, Lyft, whatever, and you went about it legally. Let's go the whole way back, because the No BS Marketing Show really is about leadership and communication, and I like to ask people about their career path, their journey. And so let's start with that. When did you get this idea? Where did it come about? Were you out drinking one night and just said, "Hey, I have an idea"?
The impetus of this was a Cardinals game and a Pirates game. It was a Cardinals-Pirates game, and I think I was in Lawrenceville, and I had a friend that was staying in an Airbnb, and I was hanging out there, and we thought, hey, we'll just grab a ride to the game. Not a big deal. Of course, welcome to Pittsburgh. The taxi situation Didn't happen. And this was 2009, and I'd kind of been tinkering around in my head with this daydream of being able to push a button and get a ride. And so next thing I did was I whiteboarded it out, and then I immediately forgot about it because I had no experience developing software in a production environment. So a couple years later, 08 08 was still having repercussions for like the next 5 years. So during that time, I went back to Pitt, graduated pre-law, and I opened a law book and I opened up the PUC regulations, and I realized that if you weren't compensated for the ride, you didn't need a license. I said, all right, so maybe we can build an app where I can hook taxi companies up and they can push, the riders can push a button and get a ride, and I'll just figure out a different way to make money. And
this at the same time as when Uber is starting, because their big thing was at the Obama inauguration. If you read the book, The Upstarts. So they're at the Obama
I think it might have even been called Zimride back then. Yes. It was old school. Yeah. And I put the app together, and we had an MVP, minimum viable product, which basically means it crashes every fifth boot. And it was a piece of junk, but we did like 50 or 60 rides on our first night. And it was incredible because that really, to me, that proved it worked.
So the minimal viable product idea is that you get something out there to show people to see if the concept works.
Yes.
And since it's so new, we're kind of accepting of the fact that it's going to be buggy.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So you just see if we liked it enough to go further.
It's just a little market confirmation. And, if you don't spend any money on marketing and people are using it, then...
Which isn't a good idea, by the way.
No, yeah, right. I'm on the wrong show. Yeah, so, if it works, and the response from the riders was phenomenal. I mean, we started getting students that wanted to use it just to get the class. And I was like, okay, this is going to work. So we were working with existing taxi infrastructure, which at the time was the only thing that was legal. And we allowed the taxi companies to use the system. And we were using PabGuard back then, the push a button, get a ride functionality. So there was no bidding system in the system yet. And that worked well. And then there was a lot of pushback. I'm sure you remember in Pennsylvania with the whole rideshare, kickback, everybody was freaking out. And the taxi companies, there was an accident in New York City with one of the rideshare companies, and the taxi companies in Pittsburgh were worried about insurance, and nobody was insuring an app that you could push a button. Yeah, that wasn't a thing. So we kind of lost our taxi companies, and to be honest, since they couldn't change their pricing, it was really literally just push a button, get a ride. And I wanted to go further. I wanted to have a system that allowed people to have variable pricing. And at this time, are you aware of Uber then, and you building to compete with it, or are you still really not aware of it? I was aware of them, but to me, pushing a button and getting a ride was really like the lowest common denominator. There's no unique selling proposition to that other than not having to call someone. I mean, yeah, you can track them, but that was a nice feature, tracking, being able to see if the driver was actually on his way. But I never thought the quality of service was much better. But long story short, we were still legal. And about 4 years ago, the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission came out with what was called an experimental license. We applied for that, and they dragged their feet, I think because there was no regulatory framework to allow them to issue that license. So they kind of didn't want to get into those dark waters. And I understand, like, nobody wants to take responsibility for single-handedly destroying the taxi market, especially if there's no statute that says they can do that. Right. So luckily for us, finally the Pennsylvania legislatures, they passed a bill, the TNC bill. The governor signed off in it. I believe he signed off on January 1st of this year, and we're in 2017. And within a month and a half, I had my license. That was February 9th. And, we did a soft launch April 20th. And kind of made sure we had all our bugs worked out. And here we are. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Josh Freeman, the founder and president of CabbyGo, a new ride-sharing app that launched recently in Pittsburgh and offers drivers and passengers more choices and better value than Uber and Lyft. I want to talk a little bit about that story that you sort of alluded to, but right before we hit the mic on, you were telling a little more about it when you had the minimum viable product and you had the courage to launch on New Year's Eve. And
it seemed like a good time. You know, when there's a shortage of, there's always a shortage of drivers on New Year's Eve. I mean, you could probably count on two hands how many times you've been stuck New Year's Eve for hours.
Yes.
Yeah, you're never going to get a ride. So I was actually completely blown away that I guess we had a very good group of drivers and they were committed to our system and the system worked. That's the best part, and I was very happy with that.
So this is 2012 going into 2013, and you had a number of people that night that signed up, went through it when your product was the minimum that it would be. You knew you had a lot of work doing the software side. But
it didn't even take credit cards. Like this thing was literally push a button, get a ride, and the driver the taxi driver shows up. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No. And so that worked well.
Yeah.
And tell us what you did to follow up after that and how 2013 went and which markets you were in.
Well, that's where everything went south. The taxi companies they started getting really territorial and realizing that they were going to lose market share to other rideshare companies. And they kind of perceived us as the enemy. And I was trying to explain to them, like, maybe it was my messaging or they just didn't. I think the idea of an application, everybody thinks they can do it on their own, and you end up with these legacy taxi companies coming out with their own apps, and they don't understand, you have to be part of something bigger, and CabbyGo is poised, to go. I mean, we want to go worldwide, and we want to become a network of carriers and TNC companies that are all within the app. So wherever you can go, just like the other rideshare companies, but we're going to be comprised of multiple companies. That's our ultimate goal. And eventually become the Airbnb of autonomous self-driving vehicles. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, that's so I guess so then you had some bumps in the road in 2013.
Yes. Yeah.
And were you mostly in the Philadelphia market?
No, it was mostly Pittsburgh and Harrisburg.
Okay.
Yeah. That was you want to talk about marketing. When we launched Harrisburg, I didn't know anything about PR. And the next thing I knew, I was on 3 TV stations and 2 newspapers and a radio show between Thursday and Monday. And I said, what the hell, what just happened? I go, I need to capitalize on that next time. And so I put it in my back pocket. I learned from that experience. I'm not really used to the whole PR thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of painful.
It is for most people.
It's fun, though.
And it can be fun, but it can be painful. And you feel like, did you maximize the opportunity a lot of times?
Exactly.
And so you scratch your head and so forth. And I think it's really important to have professional help. And I think you've got that. And you've seen the value of someone you've used here in Pittsburgh. You want to talk about him?
There is no doubt. Yeah. I mean, our local guy is Tim Colbert. He does a lot of corporate stuff. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed a couple people. I had another project in California a couple years ago where we had a PR guy, and I learned. It's funny you say no bullshit. Sometimes the message is very aggressive. I'll leave it at that, and maybe a little. I'm more of a self-deprecator. I'm not I guess it's called a grandizer. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the word is. Mm-hmm. I don't like to showboat. But sometimes the PR guys, they get really excited and they like to put it out there that, you're this big successful corporation, when in reality, you're just, I don't want to say you're faking it till you make it, but you're doing your best to provide a good service as much as you can.
Yeah.
And long story short,
there's a big difference there between some approaches. And I think you found with Tim, you've got a good approach and it's similar to ours is that, transparency and honesty are the key and telling your story in a genuine way, in the positive way. Hyperbole is nonsense. What you have to do to be a good storyteller and is to be genuine and honest with your clients and transparent and take what they do and present it in the best possible way that's accurate.
Yes.
And that is the skill. And then the second part is the tactical part, which a Tim will know and our team knows, is we know the little ins and outs of saying, okay, let's do this with this website. Let's do this with this social media. Let's call that reporter. That stuff is just like any other field. When you go to your accounting firm, they say, hey, there's a way we can put this through and get this form done quicker, get it on to the IRS. That's the same thing. And so it doesn't have to be the bullshit hyperbole. There's the honest, transparent storytelling and then the tactical piece of just being an expert and knowing what works.
And I think something you kind of touched on there, I cannot tell you how important it is to have somebody in the local marketplace, because you guys are super clued in on how things work in that market. And whether it's the local podcast or, who the contacts are, with the Pittsburgh Courier, like who knew?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. One of the things that your coverage has shown, and I've seen when reading about you, is that you offer drivers a ride-sharing industry-leading 90% retention of all fares. Tell us about how that is an advantage for you.
Yeah, well, one of our unique selling propositions for drivers is that they can basically retain 90% of their gross revenue, so approximately 90%. So that's unheard of. Everybody else is, I think, somewhere between 70 and 75%. So not only can they make more money, but that also translates into being able to charge less. Ding, ding. That's very helpful for riders to get the best deal. That's kind of a big thing. One of our other really cool features that nobody else has is we allow the drivers to create what I call a service bubble, which allows them to basically create a radius around their location. So if they want to serve their local community, they can just get ride requests in that area. Whereas our competition will assign rides, and they could assign rides as far as 45 minutes away, depending on the availability of drivers. But with our system, if they decide they only want to go 2 or 3 miles and just do their neighborhood friends to the grocery store and that kind of thing, they can set that service area, and they will only get requests in that area. And then to top it off, we have this other cool feature that our drivers are just starting to clue in on. This thing's awesome. I call it the floating bubble, which allows every time a driver does a drop off, if they have floating bubble enabled, then their radius moves with them. So they'll never have to drive more than the distance of their service area. So if they set it to 2 mile distance for pickups, they'll never have to drive more than 2 miles for a pickup.
So the drivers retain 90% of the fares.
Yeah.
What the question would be simply, is that because you are willing to take a lesser margin than Uber and Lyft?
Yes. Yeah. We're smaller, we're leaner, we're faster. The tools are already out there for us to rapidly develop software. Our stuff is built. We just don't have the overhead. I mean, look around. I mean, they're everywhere. They've got $100,000 offices. That's insane. They're burning through investor funds to subsidize rides. Like, that's crazy. Why not have the drivers just bid what they want and charge them less? You can spend $1 billion in investor funds in a year. But what does it get you at the end? I guess market share. that got the market share.
So your story could be, we're Uber if they cared about drivers and passengers.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say it like that, but you did.
But that's really it.
Yeah.
It's you're saying like we're Uber except we care about our drivers.
Yeah, and I mean, just another example.
And I'm not saying that Uber doesn't care. That's maybe too hard. But we're Uber.
I'm not saying that.
We are much more. We take care of our
We're in
drivers.
tune with our
take care of our drivers
needs.
more.
Yeah,
yes.
and just another thing.
Because I will say this. This is one of Uber's PR issues, is I will say that many times when I ride, I will hear the driver complain about Uber.
Yeah.
Which is, if you think about it, that'd be like every time somebody talked to Mike Gaddy.
How does a business
complain
like
about
that?
Mass Solutions?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's insane.
They burn them. I mean, and I'm not saying that they're being nefarious. It's a company that needs to make money. That's their business. But when everybody that works for you hates you, that to me is unsustainable.
Yeah, and and when I say that, I'm serious when I say at least 1 out of 3, but I'm saying it's almost 1 out of 2.
Yeah, and the other one just started.
Unsolicited.
The other one just started.
Yeah. But I'm saying it's like, I don't say like,
yeah.
Hey, do you think Uber treats you bad. Like, I try to make conversation. This is where I wanted to go earlier, and we'll touch on this in the second part of the show. But so that's really a key point, is that what you're doing is you're giving drivers 90% of fares. So, and you're also allowing the riders to see the bidding go on and pick whichever one they want. So you have a different unique selling proposition, as you said, a different value proposition,
yes,
which makes it all kind of definitely different than your competitor. And then you also mentioned that you have no surge pricing. Talk about that, and how are you able to do that?
Yeah, basically, our bidding system allows drivers to bid what they want. And if you don't like the ride price, then you don't choose them. And that's the that's the no surge system. We're not going to assign the surge. The surge is, a lot of people don't understand what the surge really is. The surge is an algorithm designed to get drivers into an area that is being underserved. So if there's a lot of ride requests in an area, they're going to jack the surge up so a lot of drivers move into that area. The problem is, as soon as the drivers move into the area, the surge ends. So they're just manipulating the marketplace to get drivers, which granted, I think it's a good idea if you want to have less than 6-minute pickups. That's great. They're manipulating the market, and the drivers end up chasing the surge, which is, a term that these drivers use. And I feel like that is a waste of time for everyone. Just give the drivers the tools they need to make better decisions on where to be. If they can do a 12-hour look back or a 4-hour look back, or we can use machine learning to identify choke points in the city, or identify where riders might be, or give them tools to even determine where they can be in 3 minutes, so that we can use that information to properly serve the rider's needs. That's all stuff that's going to make drivers happier. And I'm going to leave it at that. There's a ton of stuff there. I got confused myself.
Hear more of my interview with Josh Freeman on part 2 of the